Here inside of Visual Studio, let's create a new web application. This one I'll call Bootstrap. And on this dialog, if you happen to select the empty template, you truly do get an empty web application. There will be no Bootstrap present. There won't be any controllers or any other script files either. So I'm going to select the MVC project template. And when Visual Studio creates this solution, one of the packages that it will download and install into the project will be the Bootstrap NuGet package. And I can verify that just by going to packages.config, and I can see the Bootstrap version 3 package. So we're using Bootstrap version 3. And where is this used in the MVC application? Well, first let me run this and tell you that when this page appears, most of the layout and styling that you see here is layout and styling that has been applied by Bootstrap. That includes this navigation bar at the top with the links. That includes this Jumbotron display that is advertising ASP.NET. And that includes all of these pieces down here about getting started and getting more libraries and web hosting. If I expand the browser just a little bit more, those will actually lay out side by side, and that's part of Bootstrap's responsive design features. We'll talk more about that later. For right now, let's just see where this is located. Back in the project, if I look under the content folder, there's the Bootstrap CSS file. The NuGet package also gives us a minified version of that file that's a little bit smaller. And also under scripts, we will find bootstrap.js. That's required for some of the components of Bootstrap. It does have a dependency on jQuery. Fortunately, jQuery also installed in this project, and there's a minified version of the Bootstrap JavaScript file. Where are these added into the application? Well, as you might expect, that would be in the layout template, the layout view for this project. The layout view controls the structure of the UI, and it's what all the other views plug into when we call render body. And inside of here, there's two pieces to note. First, at the top, there's a styles.render for content CSS, and that is actually where the Bootstrap CSS file is going to be included because, as you might know, styles.render is using the bundling and minification features of ASP.NET MVC to bundle up a few different CSS files and include them here at the top in the head of the page. And then down here at the bottom, we're also rendering the Bootstrap script. So in order to find out what exactly is inside of these bundles, we'll have to go into the bundle config file, which is an app start. Open up bundle config, and we can see that the CSS bundle includes both bootstrap.css and our custom site.css, a place where we can add our own style sheets to customize the look of the application. And the Bootstrap bundle that appears at the bottom of the page, that includes bootstrap.js and another JavaScript file, respond.js. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But right now, what I want to do is comment out bootstrap.css and rebuild this application and run it again, just to give you an idea of what Bootstrap is doing. Because now the only styles that are available are the styles that are in site.css. We lost the layout. We lost the navigation bar at the top of the page. Everything looks rather plain and boring and 1996-ish. And let me come back in and add bootstrap.css back and show you a little bit about what Bootstrap is all about. So first of all, there's a couple things that Bootstrap just does automatically, and there's a couple things that Bootstrap can do for you when you add classes and have the right HTML structure. For example, something we'll talk about a little bit later in more detail is the navigation bar at the top of the page. That's built using CSS classes from Bootstrap like navbar, navbar inverse, navbar fixed top. What happens if I remove a few of these classes? Well, we still have a navbar, but now it's not using inverse colors, so it's white. It also doesn't stick to the top of the page. When I scroll down, the navigation bar scrolls off the top and I can no longer see it again. Add those classes back in, and you'll notice each class specifies a specific feature, like I want this navbar fixed at the top, and I want this specific color. It's not just one class that does that. That's where I was saying Bootstrap applies the single responsibility principle to CSS classes. Adding that back in, I get an inverse navbar, and it's sticky, so it stays at the top of the page even when I scroll down. And the navbar is an example of a Bootstrap widget. You apply specific classes and use a certain structure in your HTML, and Bootstrap will just use that to build a menu or a drop-down menu. But there's also places where Bootstrap just applies defaults. For instance, Let's use the developer tools to inspect this element in Chrome, this paragraph of text, which, as you'll notice, doesn't use any special styles, doesn't have any classes associated with it. Sure, it's wrapped inside of a div that's using a bootstrap style that we'll come back and talk about later, this column medium 4, but the paragraph, it's not using anything special. But Bootstrap does come through and apply some specific defaults to all the HTML elements. And this is to make sure that your site looks somewhat consistent across the different browsers, because every browser has a slightly different user agent style sheet. Each individual browser might have a different default choice for the font family, the font size, padding, margin, all those little settings that might make a site look a little bit different in each browser. Bootstrap tries to come through and normalize that. For example, if I remove some styles here, you'll see one of the defaults that Bootstrap will just apply to the body is to use a specific font family, a sans serif font. And if I remove that, we have a different font face here in Chrome. It also applies a specific font size, a specific line height, and a slightly different color than the default color that this Chrome user agent style sheet would apply. And so you can see that just by including bootstrap.css and not even adding any classes to your markup, you can achieve certain aesthetics and normalize the look of your site across different browsers. And your site should also come out looking somewhat decent on a mobile device. Let's take a look at this ASP.NET site on a mobile device. I'll look at the HTC Hero device because it is a 320 by 480 device, which is rather small, but I'll plug in the address. And you'll see that the site looks different, but it's still very functional. For one thing, there's no horizontal scroll bar here. Instead, everything gets laid out for a vertical scroll, which is much easier for people on mobile devices to scroll up and down than it is left and right. Notice that the navigation bar and the links were collapsed on this mobile device, but I can still navigate around the site. And we'll come back a little bit later and talk about this. This is the mobile-first responsive design features of Bootstrap at work. But what we can look at next is how we're achieving this layout with Bootstrap, how we're achieving essentially a 3-column layout on this page, a 3-column layout that can turn into a 1-column layout if there's not enough space for it.